Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dowell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to program 228, Fallback Plan. This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio, and you are in the right place for conversations about current needs that we as business leaders face regarding quickly changing markets, the everness of the changingness of technology, and anticipating customer expectations. The thing is, regardless of what we're facing, we're always thinking about what are we doing right now and how does it affect us in the future? So we are increasing our confidence in our long-term position as we achieve our short-term goals. Today, with us on the program is Zachary Beach, a coach, mentor, and real estate investor. He has a passion to empower entrepreneurs and business owners to create success. He went from bartender and personal trainer to expert real estate investor in less than 3 years. Also with us is Steve Rosvold, the founder and CEO of KRM Business Solutions. He's also the founder of CFO.University, and he understands the need for innovative and responsible financial leadership and the fact that it is incredibly critical to business success today. Thank you both for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jess. It's a pleasure.
All right. So we're just going to jump right in. And I want to know, Zach, when you're planning, how do you incorporate a fallback plan?
That's a fantastic question. I'll tell you that we didn't always, I have a family business, and we didn't always have a fallback plan. We're definitely those go-go entrepreneurs that are always looking for the next thing and constantly moving forward. And sometimes you're just going to make a mess and figure it out when you get there. But I'll tell you, as we've made a mess, we've then figured out what our fallback plans are. So in our real estate business, we're actually, there's moving parts, and you're dealing with people and emotions. So a fallback plan is definitely always needed. And because we've been doing this for so long now, we have very specific systems and processes that we have in place now, because you almost expect that, things are going to happen. So let's just say, for example, that we have our initial exit strategy. As we buy real estate, we have our initial exit strategy. If it doesn't work out the way we want to, then we actually make sure that we have at least 2 to 3 fallback strategies in which we can still accomplish and sell that property.
Great. Thank you. All right, Steve, when planning, how do you incorporate a fallback plan?
Well, the term fallback plan is an interesting term to use, Jess. And I think when you first asked the question, I look at a plan when you're developing a business plan going from A to Z. And that's pretty linear. And usually we have a clear idea what we want to do along the way. So we're filling in the B through Y along the way through our business plan. But what normally happens, and frequently happens, is you get waylaid. B turns into F, and F gets switched up with J, and you get and so a fallback plan isn't how I look at it. I look at it as a continuum that you're adjusting the whole time. And to do that, you have to have a solid business plan, which means however you want to put it together, it needs to be written, narrative form, so everyone understands what it is. It needs to be converted into a financial plan, so you understand what your benchmarks are, as well as having good key performance indicators and measures to help identify, are we on track? And so I don't look at it so much as a fallback plan, but as an adjustment plan along the way. And to do that, you have to have great measurement. You have to have a lot of processes in place to kind of watch as you're going through to navigate to that end Z that you're looking at, and adjustments on the way. So I didn't quite call it a fallback plan. I would call it an adjustment to what your plan is how I looked at it.
In both of the cases that you're describing, it's not something that is forefront. We're not thinking about if this fails, then that. We are, though. So now I'm curious, because I don't even know what I was thinking when I titled the show or came up with this question, other than the fact that when we act, how about this? When we act too fast or we don't think enough up front, we end up having to change direction so drastically or leave the middle of a project unexpectedly. And it's can we learn from that? Is that something that we can actually learn from? And is a fallback plan actually thinking at the beginning?
It's a really good way to look at it. I mean, I think you're spot on. And it starts, you talk about having a plan along the way, but it starts with having a vision for what you want to accomplish, right? And so once you have a vision and what you think can work, planning out how to get there, so you know the steps you're taking along the way is kind of your backup plan, right? You're looking at that and being able to adjust. But I think planning for that future, really understanding what you want to accomplish, and then the plan is the filling in the blanks to get there. And I like the perspective of that you put it in. Is it really starting with where you want to go? Having that vision is really important. Otherwise, you can be, bouncing around in a lot of different directions and not really knowing what success looks like or really what you're trying to accomplish. So I think you have the way you position that was really brilliant.
Yeah, I think just as entrepreneurs in general, fallback plans aren't the initial thought, right? It's never the initial thought, right? We're usually very type A, or we're very much a go-getter. So we just have this vision of where we want to go. And there's really, most of the time for us entrepreneurs, there is really no fallback plan. It's I'm either going there or I'm going to die trying. So what I've noticed as we've kind of grown and scaled our businesses is, that initial thought of, all right, I have a vision and I'm going to go after it and I'm going to die trying has then led to, okay, well, maybe we don't have to die trying. Maybe we can actually, after we've made this mess and we've learned some lessons, we can now put some systems and processes in place. So next time, we come across this, it's not a life or death situation. It's more of just an adjustment situation, like Steve was saying, where you just have an adjustment plan now. And it's just, okay, well, I was kind of expecting something to happen. So now that it did, now we can just put a system and process in place so now we can learn from it. And then that's really what building a business is. Eventually, you go through some of these mistakes and now you have systems and processes in place in order to now take your business and continue to chase that vision.
And sometimes they're automated and sometimes they're very not automated, and yet they're still necessary. And I know I'm listening to you, Zach, and I'm thinking about the two kinds of plans, right? One of the things that Steve shared was this need for not only a written plan, but a financial plan for benchmarks. And so I'd like to spend some time there, because I know from my perspective, in every business I've ever done, every venture I've ever gone after or said, yes, I'll stand beside you or behind you, financials are the last thing I ask for. It doesn't. And those of you listening, you should have seen Steve's face. And at the same point in time, this is one of the things, that you learn over time, that doesn't matter your vision, doesn't matter your passion. It matters that there are these benchmarks along the way. And so I am curious, both, however you want to take this concept, is it the short-term, the short-term goal of a specific project? Is it a longer-term goal of something like 18 months or 36 months in a business? And how you've successfully incorporated financials to better communicate decisions along the way. That's where I would like to get to.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll start off with that, Jess. So, and I did have a shock there. And I'm a finance guy, so I'm going to approach everything from that direction. So I realize I have a pretty myopic view on some things. But when it comes to the strategy or a planning process, and I'll look at it more long term, it's all about how you're utilizing and procuring capital. And that might be production or service capabilities. It might be your human capital, training people. It could be your infrastructure. But it's how are you taking that capital and what you have and building it into something different and better and greater. And so without that, so my view comes directly from all this capital that we have, and human capital is our most important. So how are we developing and training people? But the other, how are we using our resources to be better at the end of our period than we were at the beginning? And without that, there's a financial component to that whether it's borrowing from a bank, whether it's investing in a plant, it's working capital to run your business, whatever it is, there's a really important financial component. So an example would be, we want to grow sales 70%. Okay, well, so all of a sudden the plant operations guy says, well, I need more. I need 3 months of inventory rather than one. And the sales guy is saying I need 45-day sales terms rather than 15-day sales terms. All of a sudden you've got this a big issue with maybe you don't have enough money to really afford that growth. So that's why, to me, it's always, I don't start with the financials, but I don't go very far without having a really clear picture of what my expectations are from that plan.
It's an element of fact, isn't it? It's one of those things where there are no assumptions when it comes to what our key reports that are financially telling us the status of our business actually tell us. They can help us find assumptions when we're doing that initial thinking before we even go down a path, is what I just heard you say.
Yep. No, I think it's, for me, it really helps me focus on it. That helps me get grounded in what we're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an absolute fantastic answer, and I could totally tell that you're a CFO, which is just fantastic, because he's like, all right, I got to look at every single one of these numbers, and I'm going to be able to determine whether or not our goals are actually going to be able to be accomplished or not. Both businesses that I've been a part of are 100% bootstrap, so it's always based upon the vision comes first, figuring out where we want to go, and then as we hit milestones of, okay, well, what do we need to do? We need to increase sales. Well, most of the time we're increasing sales by using the least amount of capital as possible in a bootstrap type business. So that's just usually coming from, in my mind, like marketing techniques such as like writing copy and or utilizing outside networks in order to grow your business, such as pairing up with somebody else that maybe has a bigger influence in your niche or your market, and then exchanging email lists and really focusing on key marketing strategies that don't have a lot of capital associated with them. And until you have the ability to now determine your capital, which when you're first starting a bootstrap business, you really don't have much capital. You have a mission, a vision, and a purpose. And then as soon as your business starts growing out of that bootstrap stage, then it's really, okay, well, now let's take a look at this analyzation of the data and the money. That way we know, okay, is this going to be sustainable? And how can we actually make this a long-term business that's going to be around for a long time? So I thought, Steve, that was a fantastic answer.
I find it fascinating because there's always this point where we may or may not be aware when we have budget responsibility of what that shift in when we change what we look at. Are we going, at which point do we power through? And sometimes that means we're not, I know many small businesses, they have a plan to pay themselves and it's all there written, but they pay themselves last. And then when they at certain benchmarks of income, right? So it's not pay yourself last like every single month. This is the beginning of the business. Here's where we're going. Then there are other people who are like, yeah, no, this is what our capital is. And this is also what I'm going to be living off of. And we're thinking about this as we start. And so how does that look? And so where I was going with this is that there's this critical point of when we need to change which reports we're using, what we're looking at, and how we're thinking about all of the elements of our business plan, of our strategic plan. And I'm curious, what are the signs that say, hey, this is up for review, if you will. We need to check in, and are we still using the same reports? We need to check in. Are we asking the right questions? We need to check in, and is this information still providing us the relevant basis to figure out what questions to ask?
I'll start with Zach's answer on the entrepreneurial part where you're bootstrapping things. That means you believe in your vision, and you don't have a bunch of money to spend on it. But you're finding a way to work through and achieve whether, we call it failing fast. We want to fail fast. And the corollary to that is to, find success quickly, right? So I'd rather look at it finding success quickly, but you're trying to trying to preserve that capital through trial and error, finding, and I think this happens, I know it's my business, very, very similar to this, and it sounds a lot like Zach's, where, we're trying things out, making it work. We're not spending a whole bunch of money because maybe we don't have a bunch of money to spend, and we're finding what works. And so that is, and there's a book, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a children's book. I used to read it to our kids. It's about a guy who sat in a house, and it started raining and his roof started leaking. And he sat in his chair and started pondering, how am I going to fix the roof? And he waited so long and thought of so many different ideas. He never fixed the roof, but he got flooded out of his house. And that's such a great analogy for what, you have to act. So the planning piece, I love planning. It's really important, but you have to be able to execute. So I think, Jess, when you get to that point where you're saying, okay, now I can take a breath. I think my idea is going to work. I think maybe a bank will lend money against it, or I have customers that are funding our business. So this is starting to work. And then it gets to be a more, okay, now my vision's coming through. I need to now make sure it's financially stable over a longer period of time. And so it's that point where all of a sudden, I think the aha moment is, this is going to work. And I need to, and not professionally manage it isn't the right word, but I need to manage it more carefully for sustainability. And that's when the financial piece, I think, really becomes important.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think at the beginning of most businesses, especially if you're in the entrepreneurial field, it's really you're fighting each and every day, and like you're saying, failing fast or finding success as quickly as possible. You're really always just looking more for less. You're just always looking to spend less and create more, and a lot of that comes down to looking and getting extremely creative. So I don't even think really a budget or even financials at the beginning, most of the business weren't really the hindsight. It was more of putting your nose to the grindstone and figuring out what was working. And then the financials and the profit and loss statement and everything, you were looking at that second just to make sure that you weren't in the red at that point in time. But as soon as you started seeing profit and you started to be able to now come up with a game plan and a strategy where you could say, okay, well, now we actually have a marketing strategy. We have a financial strategy instead of just, I don't want to use the word winging it, but almost doing as much as you can and seeing what's stuck and then figuring out, okay, well, that worked. So now how can we take that piece that worked and how can we fund that? And once you have the ability to fund it, then that's when you're going to start looking at the data of, okay, now what is actually working and what is actually producing. But until you get to the point where I always want to say it's about 2 or 3 years in, when you actually have enough data within your business and you're still pushing towards the vision, you're still around, that's when you start actually diving into those financials. And that's when I think it's really important to realize where money is going in and out of.
We're talking about fallback plans today. This is program 228. And use hashtag VBB Radio to join in the conversation as you are listening, as well as between our programs. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. Stay current and receive programs to continue sparking ideas about growth strategy by subscribing to the program at voiceofboldbusiness.com. Now, back to Jess.
We're starting with vision. Sometimes it comes from our head because we see this need and we can go, yes, we can solve a problem in the world, and we go for it. Other times we're like, we know change is necessary here and we go for it. In either case, there's this element I heard on the first part of the show: keep your nose to the grindstone, take action to see what's going on, recognize where you're at. How do you know what's actually happening so that you can start recognizing and moving from this concept of wherever you're at right now to something that's a little more thoughtful, something that can move fast yet is still very slow. And well, what seems to be slow in this world of instant gratification, I shall qualify. It still may only take 20 minutes to think through something that seems major, but if it's really that major, maybe it ought to take 20 days. I'm just going to put that out there because this concept of being able to take a step back, check in where we're at, this concept of a fallback plan, it came to me during the break and listening to our awesome guests, Zach and Steve today, talking about what they're sharing is that maybe this concept of a fallback plan is everything that we've learned so we don't have to fall so far and we can bounce a little bit easier. What are your thoughts about that, gentlemen?
I love that vision that you just pointed out there. It's all about how you can continue to move forward, and when you hit those hiccups, you be able to fall less of a fall there, right? And that we don't hit the ground so hard, because I truly believe this. As entrepreneurs, we're in this state of like flux of up and down, especially when you're very tied to your business as an entrepreneur here. Your happiness and your sadness are directly related to your business as well. And I think business is so extremely emotional that as we are going through these ups and downs, as we're having a great year, we're extremely happy. As we have a not so great year, the business kind of falls along with that. So I think if we can do our best to find a way in order to not fall so far and not to always be so emotionally tied to our business, I think that just goes such a long way.
Yeah, and I look at it, Jess, that's a good point that, don't fall so far. But the way I approach it is an example. So we started out CFO.University thinking, hey, we're going to get these really great business tools for people, and they're going to love them, and we're going to sell millions of them, and that's really going to be a great tool for us and a way to make money. Well, what happened is we realized that people were really demanding kind of a membership model with courses. They liked our tools, but they wanted more. So we ended up with a coaching offering. And so we ended up, taking this, what was really, to me, I had all these tools made. It was pretty simple. I'm just going to put it out there and it was going to be wonderful. But what people wanted, I had to adjust to what they wanted. So being flexible enough and understanding, being close enough to it, that why didn't the tools sell as well as I thought? Well, ask people, why did they sell as well? They wanted more. They wanted more than a tool. They want to understand how to use it, more background. Okay, that led to courses. And then people want more than courses. They want somebody to touch and feel and be able to kind of ask questions to and have more. And so it just was an evolution. And I think that happens frequently in these businesses. And it isn't so much, a backup plan. It's much more of an evolutionary plan. And the way that I have always viewed that is by understanding kind of what's working, by understanding what I expect and measuring against what I expected from a certain action and being able to understand that, I could always adjust better. If I didn't meet that mark, what do we have to do to make it better? And so that's where the whole measurement piece, and it isn't just financials, it's more what's your expectations, and if you aren't meeting them, what isn't working in your plan to adjust. Does that make sense?
It does. And all these things popped into my head, right? So I discovered this TV show, and I'm going to totally indulge in just a minute in this new TV show that I found called Lucifer. And it's this guy who's actually the devil and decides to take a vacation on Earth. And he becomes a friend of a police detective, and they solve crime together, okay? What I find fascinating is the expectations that we have of ourselves. And he knows himself. Whatever else you think about the show, he knows himself so well. I end up cracking myself up listening and watching this just because, of course, he's going to respond that way because he knows himself. And so there's an element of the people and the things that are around us. How well are we knowing ourselves? So I'm hearing you, Steve, and I'm like, okay, we have to know ourselves. We have to know where we're at, almost to the point of absurdity sometimes, because then and only then can we communicate more effectively. Can we share our vision a little bit clearer? And then when things go wrong, another program that I'm watching that's based on the documentary, many-part documentary of the issue at Chernobyl. And I have to tell you, it's one of the scariest, darkest things ever. But the fact that people avoided decisions, didn't make quick decisions, didn't want to take responsibility for those decisions, and how it impacted this whole ecosystem, not only just in one geographic location, but the entire world. While it's grand in the sense of what we're talking about, everything has ripples. And so to be able to have that awareness and then know yourself to know, hey, I've got this. So thank you for indulging me in sharing those two things, because it's going to shape where we go a little bit next, which is, well, Have you ever had that where you've recognized a trait in yourself that has gone to the absurd, yet it was necessary, and you are able to use it to better share, better communicate, and have people understand and want to follow and hitch their wagons to your missions?
I can jump in on that real quick. It's a weakness and a strength for me that I want to know. I want to get to the root of what happened, and I want to know why. So I see a result. I want to know why that result happened. To a little bit, I'm a little bit, analysis by paralysis, so I'm not careful. So what worries me about that book I told you about earlier with the guy, I sometimes am that guy watching the roof leak, and I need to kick myself into gear to say, you better fix that darn roof. So that would be the piece that I worry about myself sometimes is, is what I'm focusing on the right thing? Is that important? Now we've done some wonderful changes along the way because we recognize that what we're doing has different potential, and we have the metrics around things to know, are things working? And so that's the exciting part. Our growth is I don't know if it's phenomenal for a 2-year-old business, but it's pretty darn good. And so I attribute that to being able to recognize what's happening out there pretty quickly and adjusting ourselves to it. So on one hand, I worry sometimes that I love Zach being able to jump into something and plow forward and just kind of never look back. And I appreciate that a lot. And sometimes I worry myself. So if I want to be critical of myself, be careful that I don't get stuck in that mode where, I'm the guy sitting on the couch watching the roof leak, and figuring out there's 20 different ways to fix it, which one I'm going to choose. And anyway, it helps me reflect on myself.
I think it's a fantastic balance of both of us be on the show, because I can't say enough that we're so much complete opposite in the way we think sometimes. I would say that I am very much a person that sees what's not there, way more of a visionary. And that probably attributes to, I wasn't fantastic at math when I was growing up, so I probably didn't focus on it as much. But just seeing what's not there. My family, we have a real estate investment company and consulting company, so we're in the same fields as being in the coach and mentor. And what we really saw was that there was this huge gap in mentoring. There was this huge gap between people selling products and people that are actually getting the results that they want. So for myself, I think to be able to see the gaps in industries and in niches is a reason why I was able to capitalize into to jump into the family business, and to be able to add to that vision, and why we've been able, as a company, been able to see some great success over the last, say, 5 years. So almost the complete opposite of Steve, but I'm definitely more of that vision and kind of seeing what's not there, compared to Steve seems to see things based upon data, which is not the wrong answer either. I think they're both fantastic views.
Well, I think this is an East Coast, West Coast bias, maybe.
Hey, you said you were hanging out in Massachusetts for a couple of years.
I did, but I didn't get that entrepreneurial spirit as much as you have it. But I would, the comment I'd make is the risk part. So you have to understand your own risk profile, and maybe because of my upbringing, not just my schooling and stuff, but I'm relatively risk averse. I want to feel something's going to work at a time, and that can slow things down a lot. But that's my personality, and Zach has a personality that's out there charging hard. And I think so. Understanding yourself and what you can tolerate is really an important part of how you approach. The question that you had is, how do you have a fallback plan? Well, it's kind of how risky are you, and how much do you want to, go out on the ledge and are prepared to do that. So it's really interesting. You do have very different guests on, which I appreciate how we approach things, and I think we both been somewhat successful.
It's important. Yeah.
I just want to add that. What's pretty cool though, and as I'm sure, Steve, you probably have somebody in your company that maybe has my type of personality, that's maybe having some more of that vision. As I have, like, my father-in-law, who is very much by the numbers and is the numbers guy, and wants to look at every single thing. So we crack up all the time, because I show up at the meeting, I'm like, I got all these ideas, like, this is where we're going, and he'll be like, all right, well, wait, let's let's look at this trimester. Let's break this down. Let's see if it even makes sense about where we're going and if it fits perfectly involved in there. And based upon finances, like let's look at the finance, see if we have the budget and see if it makes sense for us to move in that direction. So it's good to have that balance within the business itself. So I'm sure Steve's got somebody that has more of my personnel along that business, or if you had another one just like yourself, you guys would probably be sitting in that room.
It'd be crazy. Our marketing manager is our person that does that. Zach, you got a lot of ideas, always floating ideas on there. Let's do this. And I'm going, how, it kind of, gets me, I have to kind of sit back and say, okay, let's think about that. But we don't have an unlimited budget and we don't have an unlimited resources. But I think it takes both sides. It takes the entrepreneur and the pusher, and it takes the people who understand, kind of how that works for long-term success, right? To make sure that you have a good balance is a great point.
Yeah, I agree. I think the team becomes the fallback plan, right? If you have enough people that are taking a look at the problem, then you're able to see the future by seeing all those extra nuances. So it's always important to have a coach, a mentor, or some additional people that are looking into your business or from within the business to really examine where you're going, what the possible plans could be if things were averted. And I think the team really becomes the fallback plan itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great quote. I want to borrow that from you.
I know.
You can have it anytime.
I'm thinking it's going to show up in a couple of different places, Steve. I was thinking the same thing. And the way there's our risk profile. I think there's another element in here too, which is how we do us. And I have to credit Donnie Epstein for this, what I'm going to say next, because this is his work that I went, oh yeah, this shows up everywhere. It shows up in the type of business there are. It shows up in the individuals that are in business. It shows up in the individuals that are going out and doing what they do in their life in general. And so for me, everything I do starts with action. I take an action and then I stop and I figure out how does it fit into the bigger context that I have. And then if I like it and if it makes sense, then I figure out, I plug it into the structure as a double check. Do we have the resources? Is it the right time right now? What are the other questions we need to ask to understand based off of our 36 and 60 month goals and expectations for growth? So we've got that. Then there are people who have to start with the structure. I need all the pieces in place and I need to understand. And that kind of looks like this, where you have the plan that you were mentioning at the beginning, Steve, A through Z. Well, actually it's almost like here's the starting point. And then when this happens, it's more like a choose your own ending story. When this happens, go to page 32 or 64. And then when you get to that and you go to page this or page that. So they've thought out and they've created this thing of contingencies. And then there's a third way of, I don't know necessarily how to get started, but I know I have a really good idea. So for me to be able to get started, I've got to get other people and other things going so that I can see what the plan should be or what action to take, depending on what that is. And that's three variations of all kinds of ways that the starting point, though, is where I was going, the three starting points. And how the rest of that shows up is very interesting and very individual. And then based off of the individuals that are in an organization, it starts to shape the culture. So yeah, we may have people that represent Zach and Steve on our teams. We may have people that don't represent anybody like that. And maybe that's something we can look at. Is that a gap? Do we need somebody to slow us down just a little? And do we need somebody to help us keep that momentum just a little? And what does that look like? Because it turns out that's going to be the unique selling proposition, and it's going to drive how you stay competitive over time, isn't it?
I think that's very true.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think we have offsite meetings every trimester, and we'll take a look at our company and we'll say, well, where are the next pieces? Where's the next person that we need in order to hire, in order to move the business forward? And I think that's really just come about from taking one step at a time and seeing what the next door is at that time. And we even teach our students that way. It's, if you can just do A first, then the next step will present itself. So don't try to force it down the line. Don't try to see 10 years from now. Let's just see and take the action of what's directly in front of me, and then that next pathway will open up.
Mm-hmm.
Good philosophy. Yep.
Yeah. So when we keep going down this path, I'm thinking about skills that we need. I'm thinking about, the way that we work. We talked about that for a little while, and we've said it a lot of different ways. So what's a skill that you've incorporated that helps you recognize that a fallback plan is whatever you're defining it to be? And I think for the purpose of this show, and please add to that in your answer, it would be, a fallback plan is how well are we practicing? How well are we doing? So what are we learning? So when we fall, we're not falling to the very beginning. We're falling to everything that we've learned and can pick ourselves up and keep going. So with that, and I think I said the question first and then I set it up. So you with me still?
I think so, Jess. I think I
Okay,
understood
good.
what you're asking. I mean, from my perspective, how that plays itself out is number one, getting the right advisory group. They may be employees, it may be an advisory board, getting the right group around you to help counsel you, right? So whatever that is, but make sure you have the people in the most important parts of your business. If you're lacking some expertise, you got to make sure you have it. And then after that, it comes to using that you've had this plan, and now it's a matter of, well, okay, I have a plan. Now I've measured how my plan is against how I'm working. How do I react to that? And how do I get the discipline in place to learn from those changes, so that when you talk about you're not falling very far, well, you're not falling very far because you recognize the issue came up pretty quickly. So you have to be able to put the processes in place and the discipline to say, what are my most important, the key areas that I need to focus on? How do I measure those? And if I'm not meeting my expectations, how quickly can I make the adjustments? So I kind of back it up into that whole concept of, analyzing the plan, making sure and being innovative too. So I pride myself in innovation. I'm a very structured person in the way I innovate, but I'm pretty I like to think of myself as innovative. So even though I might be the curmudgeon who watches the budget closely, I'm also very quickly recognize that we need to change something. So maybe kind of a long answer to your question, but I think there's a discipline and an innovative approach that needs to be implemented, especially for newer businesses, for sure. They need that. Everyone needs the discipline eventually, and the innovation. I think really being able to be agile on your feet is really important early on in startup companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you brought up the perfect word there, and that's discipline. It's the discipline to recognize the problems that you already faced and to not react the way you did before, which was going to make you fall, but to actually have the steps in place to react the way you should now, which would allow you to then put in the successful habit or the successful actions instead of going back to falling all the way to the ground, which you don't want to do. So I think the discipline was a fantastic way to describe that. And just to add on top of that, I think it's the leadership skills that you need to acquire in order to make sure that you don't fall away to the bottom, because you're going to want to lead people that are smarter than you, or if not as smart as you, that have different skills that will move your business forward and will be there to support you and reprimand you in a way if you're starting to slip, or if you're coming across issues that may cause you to have to go into a fallback plan, or may cause your business to fall backward. So if you can hone in on those leadership skills and have the discipline to recognize when you're going down the wrong path, or following or leading off the business plan that may cause you to go into a fallback plan, then those two skills, just in general, I think will definitely make you recognize when you're kind of falling into that fallback plan.
I was thinking about confidence, and I'm thinking about the way that we use it and the way we move forward, because what I hear and what I'm experiencing from the answers that you're sharing is that there is a high level of confidence in the way that you do you, and the way that you show up to make decisions, and the way that you are evaluating things to adjust. And I'm going to use the word that Steve likes, to pivot proactively pivot instead of reactively pivot. By the way, that's something he did teach me on this show.
It's a great word.
I got to own that. I'll own that. And so this concept of confidence, and when we're talking about it, we need amazing amounts of confidence. And when we're thinking about confidence, how do we still be open? And maybe this is a question for each of you in the styles that you have. How do you stay open to receiving feedback and potentially what feels like criticism as well, whether it's solicited or not? How do you go about, or maybe even asking, how do you even ask for help when you're supposed to know? You're supposed to be, and you have this confidence that you're on the right path.
Well, I think confidence is just a knowing or an alignment of who you are and where you're going. So if you are in align with who you are and where you're going, then to be able to receive criticism and to have, say, a mentor or a coach, or even people that are below you, like some employees that report to you, if you are open enough to receive that type of criticism, it's only going to take you further. I also think receiving criticism is a skill that becomes acquired. I don't think it's something that's learned, is the best way to put it. It's not like when I was a younger child, I'll tell you, and I was in high school, I did not take criticism well at all. But as I kind of developed and my self-confidence developed, like I understood who I was, then taking criticism was just an X factor. It was allowing me to grow substantially faster compared to putting me down. So I think it's more of a learned skill. And I think anyone can acquire it, but not everybody has it.
That's a great answer. I like the idea that it's a learned skill. That's true. It takes experience. I also think that criticism, there's often, almost always, a kernel of truth, however much you might not like to hear it. So I always try to look at it and Pat, my wife, might not say I'm not good at it, but I keep working on it. But there's a kernel of truth in it, and trying to figure out what that kernel, even if you don't believe it totally, there's some reason why that came out, almost always, and trying to figure out what that is, even if you don't buy into it 100% initially. React so what can you learn from that criticism is of huge value. Whether you initially believe it or not, there's a reason why people have said that, or why something came out that way. So that's the curiosity. Why did they say that? Now I need to figure out what it is that did that, and how do I fix it? So I think that's one really important point. And confidence for me comes in two kind of channels. One is where I'm an expert. I feel like I've done the CFO thing. I feel really confident in the material that I'm creating to distribute. So I feel really confident there. And I feel I'm good at procuring good content for our member scholars. What I never did before is set up a learning management system. I never tried to do marketing. I don't know what social media is. There's all these things that I know I am way, trying to work way above my pay grade in those. So I need a lot of help in those areas. So that's where I really reach out for a lot of help. So it kind of confidence that there's these channels where I think you feel really, really good about what you're doing. And you got to recognize those places that are new to you, that are important to the success of your business, that you better find help on, or you're going to have a tough time making it. So a realization, a self-awareness of where those spaces are, I think is important.
That just brings up a huge point, though, right? So your confidence is directly related to those you're surrounding yourself with as well. Because if you get to be the expert in your field where you're extremely confident, that means that you can lean on those around you in order to still move your business forward, who are extremely confident in their neck of the woods. And it's really understanding where you are the expert and where you still have a ton of learning to be had. So as long as and it brings it back to Jess's point, where knowing who you are is the huge piece there. Because if you know who you are, you know what you stand for, you know what you're really good at, and you know what you're not good at. That allows you to be confident, both confident in the expert field that you're in, but also confident in putting surrounding yourself with the people that will allow you to be confident in places that maybe you're not extremely well off on.
So this concept of fallback plan has a whole other meaning. And I find some juxtaposition here and maybe even some dichotomy in how people react to it. And that is, we get told at some point in our younger selves, go to school, get an education, get a degree because you can use it. Well, what we're seeing today is that we go to school, we get a degree, we may or may not be using it. And so whether it's a degree, whether it's a vo-tech, whether it's a trade, whatever it is, there's this concept of have a skill to fall back on when everything else goes crazy. How come we have that advice so prevalent, but nothing like that has showed up in our conversation? I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this. You know what I mean? I mean, fall back. What does that mean? Does that mean we're not charging fast enough? Does that mean we're not believing in ourselves enough? Does that mean there's this flaw and we're actually in this period of transition and we've got to just let that go? That's old.
I don't know. I guess that's not how my mind works in a way. So I never, now that you bring that up, now I'm thinking back to the days that people said that you should always have a skill to fall back on.
My sisters say that to their kids. So, I mean, it's still happening.
Yeah, I guess so. I got a young one. Maybe I guess maybe I got to tell them that.
I don't know if you should tell them that. That's what I'm just saying. But I hear it, and I know it's still prevalent, right? That's what my dad was told. So my grandma and grandpas were told, things like that. Yeah.
Well, I think that it kind of starts with who you are. I think that there's some key things that we're all good at, but that we're naturally good at, but most skills can be acquired if you put enough hard work into it. So I guess I just disagree with that philosophy. And that's why I didn't really recognize it in my mind. It's because, okay, well, why don't you find out what you enjoy? And then why don't you develop the skills around what you enjoy doing? Instead of, just kind of settling. That's how I take that comment. It's like, oh, why don't we just settle based upon, that one natural born skill that you have? No, why don't you go out and acquire more skills that allow you to become more self-aware, that allow you to succeed in life and allow you to take it to the next level. And I think it's easier if you can build upon that initial skill that you have. But I think it's more of a tree branch effect where it's like you start with this one skill that gets you maybe, this one hobby that you like, and then you realize, hey, I got to acquire these other little skills in order to maximize that hobby, and then you acquire more, and then you start going on this waterfall effect of acquiring all these skills that eventually lead you to a place in which hopefully you're happy and you're enjoying doing the work.
Yeah, I think the idea that building the confidence. So what builds confidence? So, that's your willingness to take risk. It's your willing to go use what you believe you do well. And I think there's a lot of different avenues for that. It doesn't have to be, a college degree in this. It can be, there's a lot of ways to gain confidence in your, call it survival, but in your ability to fend for yourself, whatever that might come into. And I think so. I certainly think that's challenged a lot today. The traditional idea that people go to school and they learn something and they go into a profession. I think, I know very few millennials anymore who have gone through that, or the next generation of groups that have gone through that. They've all gone to school in something and they're doing something else today. So I think, but they had the confidence to do it. So where did they gain that confidence? Was it through how did they do that? I think that's really it's a great point. How do we gain confidence in ourselves to go do things that, and part of it, I'm sure, is in the training and development and going and learning more things, that curiosity piece. But I don't have the answer to it, but I see exactly where you're going with that, Jess, that we have that culture now.
I'm trying so hard never to say that to my son. I would, and actually going out further, in the volunteer work that I do with middle school kids, the people that work with me, not only at Red Direction, but on other projects, whatever the case may be, it's I'm looking for that concept of safety, right? There's an element of safety in that. And there's an element of, at least I can do this. Well, that's great. And that still is a place to bounce from. However, if we never move past that, and we're not adding beauty, and we're not fulfilled, and we're not staying creative, and we're not continuing to learn, which are all concepts that the two of you have shared around that, we're kind of stuck, and we might be beyond stuck. So this program, if you were attracted to the title, it's probably not what you expected. That's all I got. And so to sum this all up, and I don't know how to phrase this question because the question as I have it phrased is not correct anymore. Oh, maybe I can. Okay, so the title of the show is Fallback Plan. Usually I ask something like, what makes it bold to have a fallback plan? Well, that doesn't fit here with our conversation, and I didn't like it when I wrote it. So I'm going to change it a little. What makes it bold to plan for change, to keep learning, and to stay curious?
I think you answered the question with the words in the question. Staying curious, having a learning field. So your rewording kind of gives us the answer. But I think staying in that mode of I want to know more, I want to help more, I want to understand how I can help you more. The curiosity and that idea that learning, I think that it kind of answers the question in itself. Once we lose that and get content with where we're at. I think that's when you start, you talked about it kind of dying on the vine. And that's when I think when you lose that curiosity and that intellectual stimulation from making something better and making somebody's life better, then I think, you'd have the opposite of your question. You wouldn't be bold anymore.
Yeah, no, I've learned a lot just being on this show. And I'll tell you that it's bold in the dichotomy of the fallback plan, right? Because we have the dichotomy between me and Steve right now. We got the person that's looking at the vision. We got the person that's looking at the numbers. And I think being bold and having a fallback plan, to answer the first question, because I thought it was a good way to wrap this up. It's being bold because you have to look at the dichotomy. You have to look at both sides. It's bold. It'd be bold for me to say, I have this huge vision, but let's look at the numbers. Let's take a dive into here. Let's make sure that everything is in a line in order to accomplish that vision, because you can't have one without the other. You got to make sure that the funding's in place, the finances are in place, or the business is going to fall apart. You can't just go on a wish or a prayer. And then it's the opposite. It's like you don't need a fallback plan if you're constantly just looking at the numbers and not making any strive. If you're just staying stuck. So I think it's bold to have the fallback plan because one causes the other. You have to have the vision in order to have a fallback, but you also have to have a fallback in order to have vision.
You heard it here. You will find all the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P228. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P228. You can also search the site for Fallback Plan. Thank you so much to our special guests, Zachary Beach and Steve Rosvold. And I have to tell you, every single time I have a show, I learn something new. What I came in thinking is challenged, expanded, and sometimes completely shifts. And that is ultimately what this program is about. So keep the conversation going because it's your voice. It's what you say and how you do it and the stories that you have that will help us learn from your experience, and we will help you learn from our experience. Use hashtag VBB Radio out there after the show. And by the way, you're still here. You're listening to the end. Rate this program. Tell us, what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Is it exactly what you want? Do you want more? We use the ratings and the comments that you make to shape further shows to ensure that we're staying on track and changing our content to match your changing needs. And I want to leave you with this question because I want to know, how strong is your fallback plan?
The Voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. Use hashtag BBBRadio or email us at radio@reddirection.com to ask questions and share your experiences. Add your voice to the conversation. Together, we define what being an effective leader means today. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.